back, everybody, to the home of Jewett Guitars in lovely downtown Cleveland, Ohio. In this series of videos, what we're going to do is show you the fundamentals of binding an acoustic body guitar with wood binding. Binding a guitar is one of those things in building a guitar that's a little bit of a scary thing to do, because you've got the potential to make some mistakes which are hard to recover from. What I want to do is kind of show you some of the things that you want to avoid when binding in terms of techniques and mistakes, but also to give you just the fundamentals of how to do it properly. Remember, one of the cardinal rules of guitar making, or just about anything, is to do very clean work as precisely as possible, but as efficiently as possible. And one of the things you'll find out about binding, if you build enough guitars, is that bad binding jobs that have a lot of gaps or just a lot of problems in the execution of the binding are going to take you a lot of time to make it correct or to make it better during the latter part of the building process, which includes the finishing and the gluing and all that stuff. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with a maple guitar body that we just completed here. This is flame maple with a nice German spruce top, and it is a cutaway. The very first thing that you need to do is you need to prepare the body for binding. And that's something that's really overlooked a lot in all binding. Because as the old adage that painters have always used for years says, surface preparation is everything. So we need to get the sides flat, square to the top, and smooth, because the bearing bit that guides the router will have to follow a fair and true curve on here. If it doesn't, you're going to have interruptions and problems in the binding. So what I want to do is I want to show you now how I take the body from this point, and where we are right now is I've built and closed the box, and I've just trimmed the excess of the top and the back off with a router. So I'm going to show you how to prepare the sides in preparation for binding. Then we'll get into some binding sequences and some of the fundamentals of bending binding and things like that. So stay tuned and we'll get right into preparing this body for binding. In preparation for binding, a couple things that I also did to the top after I trimmed off the excess overhang was I applied a wash coat of shellac, de-waxed shellac to the top. Now you have to use shellac. You can use lacquer sanding sealer. You can use a water-based finish if that's what you want. I don't like using water-based though, because it will raise the grain. But shellac is easy to apply, and what that does is a couple things. It will stiffen the fibers on the top particularly, so that you minimize the chance of tear out when you come around with the binding router to bind or to route the edges for the binding and then the purfling. The second thing it does is that when you go to then apply the binding and put on the tape, it makes the tape a lot easier to remove, even though that there are some techniques for removing tape properly. But as I said, you can substitute lacquer sanding sealer for this if you want. I just went ahead and applied a couple coats of de-waxed 2-pound cut shellac. The other thing that I did in preparation for binding is that when I bent these sides, the maple sides, I also bent my binding. And we're going to show you some techniques for bending binding along with the sides, because there's a way to do it properly that avoids breaking the binding. Sometimes, if you forget to do that, you'll have to bend the binding just by itself without the sides, and I'm going to show you a way to do that. So what I've got here is I've got 4 pieces of ebony binding. one each for the non-cutaway side and then one for the cutaway side. And if you notice something here, this has been sitting around the shop quite a bit. So this particular one right here has a fair amount of spring back, or a fair amount of, yes, spring back. So I'm gonna have to put that on an iron and get that a little bit better, but we'll show you how to do that down the road. So anyways, let's get this body prepared to do the actual binding.